We are going to talk about the specific organs in the alimentary canal, how they will digest, as well as what they will absorb. Now, before we get into it, I need you to know the color scheme. If I draw something in blue, it means that that structure or that molecule will digest carbohydrates. If I do pink, that means it's going to digest proteins. And then red will be lipids. And these are your three main macromolecules, the macros for short. Now, if it's in teal, I think this is teal, I'm kind of colorblind, it will be dealing with mechanical digestion. So think about this. Mechanical, remember, is physical force, and these three will actually be chemical digestion, dealing with enzymes and other chemicals to break them down. So let's get started. So first off, when we put food into our mouths, it will only stay in our mouths for a few seconds before swallowing. How do you think we'll digest things in the mouth? Well, first off, we're obviously going to use our teeth for some mechanical digestion, and then look at the accessory structures we have. We have the salivary glands, and the salivary glands are going to secrete some enzymes that are going to begin breaking down macromolecules. So the first one in blue, because it's going to be breaking down carbohydrates, is called salivary amylase. Anytime you see AMY or AMY, it means carbohydrate, and ACE means enzyme. So it's an enzyme breaking down carbohydrates. And we will also have a small amount of what's called lingual lipase. This is very negligible, there's not a lot of it, but both of these will be secreted by these salivary glands to help start chemically breaking down both carbohydrates and fats. Furthermore, in the mouth, you can actually absorb some substances, specifically some drugs. One being something called nitroglycerin. This is a drug that actually helps relieve chest pain or angina pectoralis. So once the food is swallowed and moves into the stomach, it will stay in the stomach for about 1 to 3 hours, give or take, depending on what's in it. Now the stomach will have some mechanical digestion in the form of churning. So the stomach is an amazing structure. It can expand very, very large compared to its resting state, and it will actually contract and move and mix food inside of it. That's called churning and mixing. And within the stomach itself, it will also secrete some different things to help initiate digestion. One thing being gastric lipase. Anytime you see the word gastro or gastric, it refers to stomach, and then lipase, once again, is breaking down lipids. The stomach cells will also secrete two other things. One will be called pepsinogen. Now, pepsinogen, pep usually refers to protein, and ogen means inactive. So this is an enzyme specifically that's going to chop up proteins, but it's inactivated right now. So we need to activate it. And the way we activate pepsinogen is going to be through hydrochloric acid. Okay, so hydrochloric acid will actually activate pepsinogen and turn it into something called pepsin. Pepsin is the active protein enzyme that will chop up the proteins. And furthermore, hydrochloric acid does a couple other things. Number one, it unravels proteins to help pepsin work better, and it also has an immune component because a lot of things cannot live in a really acidic environment, so hydrochloric acid basically kills off any sort of bacteria or pathogens that could have been getting into your stomach. Now the stomach will also do a little bit of absorption. There are three main things I want you to remember that the stomach absorbs. One being water. And this makes sense because if you've ever just chugged a big glass of water, you usually have to pee relatively quickly. That's because the water gets absorbed quickly in your stomach. The second thing being alcohol, and the third thing being aspirin. And this makes sense because although contents aren't in the stomach for that long, you can usually feel the effects of alcohol and aspirin relatively quickly because they're being absorbed directly through the walls of the stomach. So here we've digested a lot of different things, specifically lipids, proteins, and we've kind of churned and mixed everything together. So now all of that food stuff is going to move into the small intestine, specifically the duodenum. And I want you to think of the duodenum as the main mixing center. And that's because you can see here that the liver, the pancreas, and the stomach are all dumping their contents into this one area called the duodenum, a really small chunk of the small intestine. So at the duodenum, a lot of digestion is going to occur, which makes sense because we're going to start absorbing a lot of things in the small intestine. So the first things we'll talk about are the secretions from the pancreas. The pancreas will release enzymes called chymotrypsin and trypsin, and these enzymes will help to break down proteins. The pancreas will also secrete pancreatic lipase, enzyme that breaks down fats And it'll also secrete pancreatic amylase. And this will break down carbohydrates. Now, another thing the pancreas secretes that doesn't deal with digestion is actually sodium bicarbonate. Now, this is a molecule that will actually neutralize the acid. Because think about it, as things are moving from the stomach to the small intestine, there's a lot of hydrochloric acid there, and acid burns through cells sometimes, okay? So when we get there, we need to neutralize it with the sodium bicarbonate so that all the stuff passing into the duodenum aren't very acidic. Wonderful. And now let's talk about what the liver will secrete. The liver will release something called bile that's originally stored in the gallbladder before it's secreted into the duodenum. And bile will do something called emulsification of fats. This basically helps to clump up fats into smaller and smaller pieces so that then they can be absorbed easier later on. And at this point, guys, look at how many enzymes and different mechanical digestion occurrences have happened. So by this point, we should have taken basically every big scale food item and chopped it into molecules, which remember was the first goal of the digestive system, to break food down into molecules. So at this point, we are going to enter the longest section of your digestive tract, the jejunum and the ileum, which are the latter points of the small intestine. And the main goal of these areas are going to be to absorb those nutrients. So there will not be any digestion occurring here, but we will absorb basically all the macromolecules, vitamins, minerals, etc. So compared to the previous absorption of the mouth and the stomach, this is where the magic happens. The small intestine is where all this absorption will occur, and this stuff will stay in the small intestine for about 2 to 6 hours before being passed into the large intestine. So now we've passed into the large intestine or the colon. And although this isn't that long of a length, just a couple meters, it's actually going to stay in the large intestine from anywhere to 10 to 60 hours. There's not going to be any digestion occurring here, except for maybe a little bit of breakdown from bacteria. Basically, the bacteria are just going to eat up the rest of the stuff that we have left in this large intestine. There are some absorptive properties of the large intestine. Specifically, we're going to absorb more water, some minerals and salts, as well as vitamin B12. And once some of this absorption happens and all of that feces continues to get pushed through the large intestine, it's eventually going to be eliminated through the rectum and the anus. Now, I've saved probably the most important point for last. As you can see, basically from the stomach all the way down through the large intestine, we are absorbing basically all of the nutrients that we need. And remember that absorption means to put it into the bloodstream. But everything that is absorbed in these areas is actually going to travel first to the liver. This is called the hepatic portal system. Hepatic usually refers to liver, and what the liver will do is it will take these nutrients and basically decide what to do with them. So for example, if you drank some alcohol, the liver will actually break down some of that alcohol before it gets into the rest of the blood circulation. This is important so you don't have heightened toxicity immediately, right? The liver will also decide, hey, if we have plenty of, say, carbohydrates, maybe we need to store some of them, or maybe for fats, we need to store some fats. So basically, the liver just acts as like the Amazon warehouse factory, right? It receives all of these boxes and things and determines where they need to go. Do they need to get dumped in the bloodstream first? Do they need to be stored? Do they need to be detoxified? What have you? And that's really, really important to go there first. But if you absorb things through the mouth, it actually just goes directly into the systemic bloodstream. So it bypasses this liver portal system and just goes everywhere immediately. And the same holds true with the absorption in the anus. So that's one reason you can actually take medications up through the anus, because you will absorb them directly into the bloodstream and it'll go everywhere before going to the liver first. So is your anus very similar to your mouth and your mouth similar to your anus? Yeah, it is. So as we finish up this part of the digestive system, we're going to move into the next part here, which is going to deal with the cellular level of absorption for the 3 main macromolecules. Thanks for watching.